Chapter 389, Suppress the Army and Destroy its Prestige. This chapter is updated by Novels.pl. Ultimate Realm, Bukion Fan has once reached the legendary highest realm. That can't be true. Only a few people have done it since the ancient times. A tossed stone raises 1,000 ripples. Students on the stairway to heaven were all shocked. Many of them were staring at Bukion Fan. Bukion Fan remained stone cold as he stared at Zhang Yuochen. Zhang Yuochen was not surprised at all. He had reached the ultimate realm 3 times. Hence, the ultimate realm was not so hard to reach as people imagined. At least, it is possible to be achieved by humans. Zhang Yuochen said, "You are possibly misunderstood. You don't need to prove your strength. I don't want to fight with you since the person you want to defeat is Di Yi, not me." Bukion Fan frowned, and he clenched his fists with anger. A stroke of chi billow gushed out of his body. He said, "If that is the case, then forgive me if I offend you." Within an instant, he leapt 3 steps forward and chopped toward Zhang Yuochen's neck with his hand. It was the broadsword technique of army suppressing and prestige destroying. The martial technique of ghost level inferior class contained the most fierce and direct movement of the broadsword technique: chop, stab, twining head. It could simplify all complicated moves into only 3 moves. It seemed that there were only 3 moves, but every move contained the quintessence of the broadsword technique, taking someone's life within 1 move. In the army, only an officer who was the commander-in-chief was qualified to practice the broadsword technique of army suppressing and prestige destroying. If he wanted to succeed in practicing it, he had to practice it on the battlefield. Only after he killed tens of thousands of people would he have a chance in successfully mastering the technique. The first move that Bukion Fan applied was the knife of army suppressing. He swung his arm as if it was a broadsword, and it formed half-moon of knife light in front of his arm. Swish! Before Bukion Fan finished his motion, Zhang Yuochen had already felt the murderous intent, sharpness, and hostility the strike contained, as if it could eliminate every enemy who was in its way. Zhang Yuochen had to fight back. He pressed together with his forefinger and middle finger. He used his hand as a sword to apply one move of Nine Yang Sword, pull chestnut out of fire. Sword comprehension and genuine chi condensed on his 2 fingertips, which thrust it quickly toward the side tip of Bukion Fan's palm. Pow! There was the clashing sound of knife and sword. Both of them fought recklessly. Bukion Fan had sharp eyes and acted quickly. All his power surged, which drove the arm to rotate. He immediately applied the second move of the broadsword technique, dispiriting knife technique. The second attack seemed to be even more terrifying than the first. Its power and momentum was astonishing. It could be seen with bare eyes that there was a shadow of broadsword above Bukion Fan's arm. It followed the track of his arm movement and chopped toward Zhang Yuochen's waist. Moonglade knife technique. Zhang Yuochen applied one sword technique of Nine Yang Sword again and held back Bukion Fan's second attack once again. Regicide knife technique. Without hesitation, Bukion Fan applied the third movement of the broadsword technique of army suppressing and prestige destroying, which was the most powerful one. Faintly, it could be seen that there was a giant man in armor who was standing behind him. He swung his sword toward Zhang Yuochen's head. Boom! It looked like a knife and tens of thousands of knives as well. All of them sliced down at the same time. 3 knives chopped in a row, and their power continued to increase. Facing the overwhelming knife energy, Zhang Yuochen looked serious as well. He moved 1 step backward to decrease the pressure of the broadsword technique. He mobilized the power of sword comprehension and applied the realm of heart integrated into sword. He held his hands together, and his whole body became a sword and stabbed toward Bukion Fan. Pow! Bukion Fan flew backward and fell back to more than 16 meters away. His arms were trembling. There was a drop of blood dripping from his sleeve. Zhang Yuochen retreated 3 steps. His 10 fingers were hurt and numb as if he just tried to punch an iron mountain. Amazing. He could actually hold on 3 moves of my broadsword technique of army suppressing and prestige destroying. No wonder he could defeat Di Yi. Bukion Fan was serious. There was a layer of genuine chi aura floating on his arm. Suddenly, the blood which had dropped out turned into spiritual blood was sucked into his nose and mouth. Zhang Yuochen said, "You are also powerful." "I have used all my strength." Bukion Fan showed a smile in his eyes. He said, all of your strength? I don't think so. I have checked on your profile. When you were in the Black Realm, your spiritual power was over 30th level. I practice the broadsword technique of army suppressing and prestige destroying, which emphasis mostly on the momentum. Once the broadsword technique strikes out, it has to destroy the warrior's spirit. Even if a warrior in the fish dragon realm, he can't be completely stationed, but you remained untouched from the beginning to the end. So I'm guessing that your spiritual power has reached the 40th level. You deserve to be called a master of spiritual power. If you attack by applying the spiritual power, your strength should be more than this. Zhang Yuochen said, 40th level of spiritual power? You've been exaggerating. Bu Qianfan seemed to be very confident. He continued, if your spiritual power is not strong enough to a certain degree, how can you hold back the power of Di's demon's heart? Even with your sword technique realm of heart integrated into sword, you can't defeat Di if you are both in the same realm. Bu Qianfan then added, even if you have the spiritual power as the final resolution, you are not necessarily invincible when both of you are in the same realm. I also have a final resolution. If you and I are engaged in a life and death struggle, my chance to survive is bigger than you, because you have a weakness that you don't even realize it yourself. Zhang Yuochen replied, what weakness? Fighting experience. The fighting experience in the hovering of life and death. Bu Qianfan said, I grew up on the battlefield and have experienced various wars for no less than 10,000 times. Among them, there were several hundred times that I was on the verge of death, struggling to be alive, crawling in between life and death and going through trials and tribulations on the blood-soaked battlefields. The number of wars I have experienced is more than 10 times you have experienced. Every time, some will stand and some will fall. Even if Di defeated me last time, he couldn't kill me and could only watch me leave. Zhang Yuochen became serious because Bu Qianfan was telling the truth. Compared with him, Zhang Yuochen's fighting experience and the amount of going through trials and tribulations were indeed not enough. Of course, if it was really a fight between life and death, Zhang Yuochen did not think that he was the one that going to die, because Zhang Yuochen had an indomitable faith. Zhang Yuochen said, I'm very curious of why you lost to Di. Were there any flaws in your martial arts? Bu Qianfan was silent for a moment. He seemed to be recalling something. Afterward, he shook his head and turned around, walking down the stairway to heaven. He said, Zhang Yuochen, if you want to know the answer, come and find me in the big battalion of Ministry of War. If you want to compensate for your weakness, you must come. Zhang Yuochen stared at Bu Qianfan's shadow. He smiled and said, what an interesting man. Bu Qianfan was not a saintly being, but he had lots of experience on the battlefield. He had reached the ultimate realm, so he had the strength to fight against a saintly being. Although he was not a saintly being, he stayed at the top of the earth board for 3 years. He really had something that others did not. Zhang Yuochen stared at Xu King, who was not far away. He asked, do you still want to fight? Xu King's condition of injury had totally healed. With the regulation of the genuine qi, both of his hands immediately turned into silver metals. He said with a smile, Zhang Yuochen, we don't need to continue the fight. We can have another competition. What kind of other competition? Zhang Yuochen said. Xu King pointed at stairway to heaven. He said, let's see who can climb higher. If you can win, the previous grudge between us would be forgotten once and for all. If you lose, you have to kneel in front of the gate of St. Xu Gentry for 3 days as an apology to us. Kneel before a saint is not disgraceful, is it? As simple as that? Zhang Yuochen was a bit unconvinced. There was suppression of gods on the stairway to heaven. The higher one's cultivation was, the more powerful the suppression one will encounter. Only when one's talent is greater, his spiritual power will be more powerful. Their warriors who had more powerful martial soul could climb higher up the stairway. Xu King should know it clearly. His greatest advantage was that his cultivation was deeper than Zhang Yuochen's. In this case, why did he give up his own advantage and fight against Zhang Yuochen in a tougher condition? Although Zhang Yuochen thought that Xu King must have had a plan, he did not back out and directly agreed instead. Xu King rushed out first and reached the 40th level stairway without much effort, and he continued to climb up very quickly. Zhang Yuochen rushed to the 30th stairway first. He ascended to the 31st, 32nd stairway after leaving his name on the jade tablet. A moment later, Zhang Yuochen had already been on the 40th stairway. At this moment, the invisible pressure became very overwhelming. There seemed to be 40 times of normal gravity on crushing down on Zhang Yuochen's body, which not only squeezed on Zhang Yuochen's body, but also on Zhang Yuochen's martial soul. An ordinary warrior would have been crushed to the ground long ago. Zhang Yuochen raised his head. There were 57 warriors who had ascended the 40th level. Before that there were several students of Omen Ridge fought with the students of Saint Xu Gentry. There were also other warriors who had ascended the stairway to heaven, going up one step by one step. There was a powerful warrior who had already reached the 65th stairway. He was the inheritor of the powerful Saint family. He wore a metal vest and exposed his bronze-colored arms. It made him seem to be particularly mighty. There were 3 people who had ascended the 60th stairway. The other 2 were also inheritors of the powerful Saint family. 18 warriors had climbed to the 50th stairway. Zihan Shaw, who had been climbing the stairway to heaven before that, had reached the 54th stairway. But his potential seemed to have been exhausted. He stood on the stairway, trying hard to hold on. The sweat broke out all over his body and his body bent. He could not set his feet on the 55th stairway no matter how hard he tried. PFFT. Zihan Shaw made a move forcibly and wanted to ascend the 55th stairway. He was hit by an invisible power and flew out. She rolled down with blood spitting out of her mouth. She fell to the 40th stairway and regained her posture. Then she got up and saw Zhang Yuochen, who was not far away. Darn, Zhang Yuochen is actually so powerful. I must not lose to him. Zihan Shaw certainly had seen the fight between Zhang Yuochen and Xu King and Buqian Fan. Now seeing that Zhang Yuochen was right in front of him, he was frustrated, so he clenched his teeth and tried again. He closely followed Zhang Yuochen and climbed up again. To be continued.